Genesis chapter 29. Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east. If you recall, his mother had said, don't marry one of the girls around here, go back from where we are, back to the town of Haran, and to Laban, my brother, and marry one of his daughters. So it's interesting to study Abram's family tree. Abraham, Terah, Abram's dad, had Abraham, Sarah, his half-sister, Nahor, and Haran. Haran had several kids. They all kind of intermarried. It's pretty cool to chart it out and see. Well, Abraham married his half-sister Sarah, and they had Isaac. Abram also married the servant girl Hagar, and they had Ishmael, and there's been a lot of conflict there. So now Isaac married Rebekah in the last story we read. Well, Rebekah was in this same family tree, and they had Jacob and Esau, and now Jacob is going to marry Rachel and Leah and the two servant girls. Ends up with 4 wives, and they're all back to the same family. So somebody charted it out and ended up with Jacob, though, ends up with 12 sons and 1 daughter, called the 12 tribes of Israel. Later, his name Jacob gets changed to Israel, so Israel got divided up into 12 sections, and that's a lot of the Bible history, dividing up the land among those 12 tribes from the book of Joshua. So they call them the 12 tribes, but that's Jacob's 12 sons. We'll get to that in a minute. So he looked, that would be Jacob, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place. Probably to keep dirt and stuff from falling in, or keep a kid from falling in the well. Put a rock over the lid. And Jacob said to them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said, Know ye Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. And he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He is well. And behold, Rachel his daughter cometh with the sheep. And he said, Lo, it is yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered. This is an example where we can see that cattle is referring to sheep in the Bible. Be gathered together, water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. And they said, We cannot until all the flocks be gathered together. Until they roll the stone from the well's mouth, then we water the sheep. You know, it's amazing how many people will stop their work waiting for one thing. Oh, we can't do that because we got to get all the flocks together. Look, just water the sheep. Okay? Figure out a way to do it. My dad would say, make a way, not an excuse. Do it. Get it done. This is an example. There's an example in history called the Gordian knot. Anybody ever heard of the Gordian knot before? The story goes that in ancient Persia, there was a knot that had been tied in the ox cart. They had tied this big knot around the tongue of the ox cart. It was in the palace of the former kings of Phrygia at Gordium, called the Gordian knot. In the 4th century BC, when Alexander arrived, Alexander the Great, at which point Phrygia had been reduced to a satrap or province of the Persian Empire. An oracle had declared that any man who could unravel its elaborate knots was destined to become the ruler of all of Asia. Whoever can untie this knot is going to be the ruler. So Alexander comes up, he sees the knot, he hears the story, takes his sword and cuts the knot to a bunch of pieces. Forget untying the thing, cut it. And that to this day is still used as a symbol of a difficult problem. They'll say, well, you got a real complicated problem here. It's a Gordian knot. Well, get the sword and cut it. Quit trying to. Sometimes that's what you got to do. That's where a good leader will figure out a way to get it done. The Americans spent over $1 million in the space race developing an ink pen that would work in 0 gravity. Because ink pens have to have gravity. If you hold right uphill with your pen, it'll quit writing after a while. So they spent $1 million trying to get a pressurized ink pen so the guys could write in space. The Soviets used a pencil. Like, duh. Right? If some people look for the most expensive way to fix things, just come on, think about it, okay? If you got a Gordian knot in your life, cut the knot. Don't quit trying to untangle it, just cut it. Get moving, do something else. Okay, so while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Two things attracted him to this girl. She's good looking, and chance to get rich. Marry into a family. They got a bunch of sheep. In that culture, that was their wealth. Okay, oh, good looking daughter, bunch of sheep. I better check this one out. Jacob went near, rolled the stone from the well's mouth. No sense waiting for everybody. Move the stone, water the sheep. Come on, get the job done. And watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice and wept. Must have been a bad kiss if he cried right after he kissed her. Get some Tic Tacs or something. Okay. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. Now, girls, if somebody kisses you, go run and tell your dad. Okay, that's just rule number 9 right here out of the Bible. Okay. And it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him into his house, and he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Surely thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month. Lived there for a month. And Laban said to Jacob, Because thou art my brother, shouldst thou therefore serve me for naught? Naught, the old English word for nothing. Tell me, what shall thy wages be? What do you want me to pay you? And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed. Now, there's been all kinds of speculation what that means. One theory is that out there in the desert, people would often get a disease in their eyes from the dryness, and they would turn red and run all the time. And they would look like they're crying all the time, and their eyes would be red and puffy. That's one theory. I don't know what the answer is, okay? But Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. Well-favored means well-endowed, okay? So here he's got these 2 daughters, Leah and Rachel. And Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel thy younger daughter. See, back in those days, you had to give a dowry if you're going to marry somebody. I think, and I don't know the truth of all this, but I think the situation is, let's say you want to marry a girl, you would give the dad, $5,000 dowry. He would keep that for her in case you left her. So they've now got some of your money, and it's going to take care of her needs and help her, pay rent and buy groceries in case you leave. So the dowry was kind of a, dad's going to hold this, or she's going to hold it in case you leave. Well, he didn't have any money. The guy's broke. He said, I don't have any money. I can't give a dowry. He said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel. Indentured servant. What's 7 years' wages worth? Let's say $25,000 a year. So I'm going to pay nearly $200,000 for this girl in today's economy. Is about what he's saying. Okay. I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel. And Laban said, It's better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. Stay here. You got a job, son. You can work for 7 years. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had to her. Guys madly in love, worked 7 years, taking care of the sheep, working on the farm, whatever they did. Now, time to get married. And Jacob said to Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. I'm ready to get married. I've been looking at this girl for 7 years. Let's go. Get the ceremony, Dad. Okay? And Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter, and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. Must have been dark. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for an handmaid. So the next morning, it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this that thou hast done to me? Did not I serve thee for Rachel? Wherefore hast thou beguiled me? You tricked me. Well, Jacob, how many people did you trick in your lifetime? Like your dad, pulling the wool over his eyes? Like your brother? Your name, Jacob, means trickster or supplanter. The Bible says you reap what you sow. Some people do bad to other people all the time and wonder, why do people do bad things to me? Well, duh, you reap what you sow. Here's the ultimate trickster, mad at his father-in-law for tricking him, giving him the wrong woman. I wonder how many people woke up after the honeymoon, realized, I got the wrong one. Oh, no. 50% of marriages end in divorce now in America. 50%. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So, what have you've tricked me. Dad, you tricked me. And Laban said, it must not be so and done in our country. I think he's lying. I think he's making up a brand new rule. We're not allowed to marry the younger daughter off first. We have to marry the older daughter off. Well, the older daughter's ugly, Dad. I didn't want that one. Well, you got her. Okay, now feed her the rest of your life. To give the younger before the first. But I think he made up that rule on the spot. Okay. Somebody said 87% of all statistics are made up on the spot. Like that one I just made up. Okay. He said, fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service that thou shalt serve me yet 7 other years. Now, there's 2 theories about this. He had to work 7 more years to get Rachel, or he had to work 1 week, but promised to work for 7 more years. I think that's more likely. You have a honeymoon for a week with Leah, and then you promise me 7 more years of indentured servitude, and I'll give you Rachel also. And Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah, his handmaid, to be her maid. So now Jacob's got to support 4 women in the house. And you're going to see, you talk about, what's some of those shows on TV where they always have the soap operas, okay? Soap operas, this is ultimate soap opera back here in the book of Genesis. This guy, 4 women in the house, they all competing with each other, competing for his attention. And he went in also to Rachel, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and called his name Reuben. Now that long tube out here we got by the piano is called a Reuben's tube. Flames dance to the music. Pretty cool. We'll have that. We'll use that as a heater also for the building this winter. She said, surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore will my husband love me. So many women do not understand. They don't get it. They think, if I do this for my husband, he'll love me. If I provide him children, if I give him my body, if I do whatever. They just don't get it. I taught high school 15 years, and I saw people do some of the dumbest things, like, you don't understand. That's not how you get love. Now my husband's going to love me, I gave him a son. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, because the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, now this time will my husband be joined unto me. Because I have borne him 3 sons, therefore was his name called Levi. Later, Levi became the head of the tribe, the Levites, that were the priests for Israel. All the priests are called the sons of Levi. Okay. Moses was a son of Levi. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and left bearing. Judah means praise. And my computer is frozen up here. Hang on. This is weird. The picture froze up. I think the audio keeps going, though. I don't know. Steve said it happens once in a while. Okay, there we go. Back to... Hi, guys. We're back. So, later in the next chapter, we'll see Jacob has a bunch more kids. He ends up with 12 sons and 1 daughter. Now, Leah ends up having 6 of the sons and the daughter. Bilhah, her handmaid, he ends up marrying her too. She has 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali. Rachel eventually has 2 kids, Joseph and Benjamin. Now, before Benjamin is even born, these other brothers sell Joseph to be a slave down to Egypt. There is constant friction between this family because Jacob loves Rachel more than the rest of them, and therefore he loves her children more than the rest of them. And when dads show favoritism to 1 or 2 of the kids, it really wreaks havoc in the family. My dad was great. Anytime Sears had a sale, they'd had twice a year, Sears in Peoria, Illinois, would have a tool sale. And he'd get us boys, throw us in the Volkswagen and say, okay guys, let's go, we're going to Sears. He'd say, now you can each get $50 worth of tools. Now back then, $50 was a lot of money, you know. So we would buy tools, and man, by the time I was 15, I had my own, I knew how to build everything Dad had taught me, and I had the tools to do it. But he was always equal with all of us. If he gave one $50, he gave everybody $50. He was fair. Sure Dad do that with you guys? Probably favors the daughter more than the brothers, right? Yeah, probably. Okay, never mind. Thomas, we won't hold you accountable for that. Okay. So then Zilpah, the maid, had 2 sons. So you're going to see these names all through the Bible, these 12 names, the 12 tribes of Israel. Later, 10 of them went off captive into Babylon, or into Syria, and never came back. The 2 other tribes went captive in Judah, and Benjamin went captive into Judah, where Jesus came from, and Benjamin. We'll see that later, about 100 years before we get there, at the rate we're going. But they stayed another 100 years in the Promised Land, and then they went captive into captivity in the book of Daniel. They're hauled off to Babylon. But this is the history. Jacob has these 2 wives and 2 concubines, and he ends up with 12 sons. Those are called the 12 tribes of Israel. So this is the beginning, Genesis 29, of the history of this family. And most of the Bible now is going to be centered around that family. Rather than God write a book and focus on the whole world, it would get very confusing. He could have chosen the Norwegians, he could have chosen the Swedes, he could have chosen the Swahilis, he chose the Jews. I don't know why. There's a poem, How Odd of God to Choose the Jews. But he did. He chose this family and said, I want you guys to do something for me. Abraham, I want you and your descendants to bring the world the Messiah. And Jesus came through this family, okay? Again, could have come from anywhere, but he came through that family. Secondly, you're going to bring the world my word. And just about all of the Bible is written by a Jew or a descendant of Abraham. And you're going to be a model nation. You're going to show the world how it ought to be done. Or, in your case, how it ought not to be done. If you do good, I'm going to bless you. If you do wrong, I'm going to curse you. And most of their history, they're getting spanked because they didn't do good. And I'm kind of glad it's them and not the Norwegians, okay? Or not the Swedes or something else. They've been clobbered over and over. They finally learned one lesson. It took them about 1,000 years or so. Don't worship idols. You'll see them all through their history, worshiping idols, falling off, going after the pagans' neighbors. Finally they learned, God told us with Moses, don't make a graven image. They finally got that lesson. And what's going to happen in the future, we're going to see a time, somewhere in the tribulation time, or I don't know when, Antichrist is going to require everybody to receive a mark in your hand or in your forehead. And you can't buy or sell without the mark. You can see, every time you go to the store now, you can see how close we are. We're racing toward that technology right there. If you have a mark, you can buy or sell. The punishment for not taking the mark is just simply you can't buy or sell. And then when Antichrist sets up an image in the temple and desolates this brand new temple and says, y'all bow down and worship the image, something's going to click in their Jewish mind. Oh, this isn't the Christ. We finally learned after 3,000 years, don't worship idols. This guy's from the devil. They're finally going to get it. It's going to dawn on them. So God's chosen the Jews, and this is the history of this family, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the 12 tribes. They called the 12 tribes. We'll get into more of that